Hello and welcome to Let the Stone Speak. I'm Brent Nagtegaal, your host. This is a podcast where we discuss the latest in biblical archaeology from here in Israel. And today I've got three separate stories for you and some really interesting video. We've got the discovery or the rediscovery of the Ishmael Papyrus, one of the very few papyri that have been found from the First Temple period. This one has been recently deciphered by Shmuel Ahituv of Ben Gurion University. We'll be talking to him or showing an interview that I took with him just a couple of days ago, an exclusive interview. Then we'll be talking about a silver coin from the fourth year of the Revolt that was just handed back to the state of Israel. Very interesting discovery. And then finally, we'll be showing a really video of a breaking discovery of a late Bronze Age tomb that was discovered on the coast of southern Israel, Palmachim. And there's some really incredible video going around of when the Antiquities Authority first broke into or came into the tomb, discovered it with just a mass of vessels and bodies, and it's absolutely incredible. And so I just checked just an hour ago, and finally there is one news story about it, and so we'll be quoting from that plus showing you the video. So you want to stick with us today, and if you aren't watching this, you're just listening to it, I do advise you to watch it because of the video that we'll be showing on today's program, and then also in the forthcoming programs as well. We'll be heavily focusing on interviews with some of these Israeli scientists, Israeli academics that are making these tremendous discoveries. I would like to mention also our Let the Stone Speak magazine. This is a magazine that comes out 6 times per year. It's currently 32 pages, but our editor-in-chief, Mr. Gerald Fleury, decided to increase it to 40 pages. So the next edition, and from there on after, it is going to be 40 pages. Coming out every 2 months, and it focuses on biblical archaeology and biblical history, and you can receive a copy of this magazine. Full color, absolutely beautiful. Available to you wherever you are in the world for free. You can obviously just get the PDF of it if you want by going to our website, armstronginstitute.org, and you can read about it there or download a copy there. But I suggest you get the hard copy, like many people are. We've got about 290 subscribers here in Israel right now. Many of them some of them came to our opening 2 weeks ago. And then we also have over 1,000 more from other parts of the world. But this is definitely a magazine with a growing audience, and you'll want to get your hands on a copy. So if you do want a copy, go to our website, armstronginstitute.org. Simply scroll down and you'll find a place where the Let the Stone Speak magazine is offered, or you can write an email to letters@armstronginstitute.org with your address, and we'll make sure you get a copy. So first of all, I want to talk about this ancient papyrus. This is kind of it is an ancient piece of writing. A lot of people are under the impression that there was low literacy in ancient Judah or Israel around this time, that perhaps not too many people wrote down things on paper. This was the ancient paper, this papyrus made of reeds. Perhaps they just wrote on potsherds because they didn't know how to manufacture, or they were not sophisticated enough to manufacture the papyrus. But this is becoming a more and more untenable position. And this ancient papyrus that came to light recently and was published, hasn't been published fully yet. It will be brought to documentation and publishing to the public here very shortly. But it was presented for the first time last Thursday to the Bible Lands, the decipherment of it at the Bible Lands Museum. This was their first Judean Desert Conference. It was an all-day event. We went there, a number of us from the Institute went there to hear from Professor Ahituv, one of the great epigraphers remaining in Israel, a long-standing professor emeritus from Ben Gurion University of the Negev. And it was all in Hebrew, so we did film it. However, we asked if it was okay to put on the whole presentation of his on the podcast, but he said he'd rather wait for the publication to come out. That's going to come out very shortly. However, he did afford us a 5-minute interview at the end to discuss some of these details about this ancient piece of writing. So stick around for that. I'll be playing that in a couple of minutes. So we will have an article about this. One of our authors is working on it already, basically describing what this inscription says. It's half an inscription written in Paleo-Hebrew, so written in ancient First Temple period Hebrew. The dating of it based both on carbon dating of the papyrus and then also the writing style as well, dates to around the 6th century, end of the 7th, early 6th century. So right around the time period that Jeremiah the prophet was active, right before Judah fell to the Babylonians, this history that you're probably very familiar with. And it is written to somebody called Ishmael. And that's why it's being called the Ishmael Papyrus. A number of words on the papyrus talk about how it's only a partial inscription, but it says, "To Ishmael send," meaning this is some type of document that's telling this man Ishmael to send something to them. There are another couple of insignificant words in a way, and Mr. Ahituv will explain that, Professor Ahituv, in his interview. However, what I do think is interesting about this is the third such First Temple period papyrus that was found. This wasn't found in a controlled scientific excavation, and then the chain of custody comes from the dig directly to the lab, directly to the epigrapher to decipher it, and there you have it. This came in a very roundabout way to the public eye. And it's important because it shows you that they were writing on papyrus, and it shows you a biblical name that is used. This man Ishmael, we don't know who he is. He's not somebody that we can say this is definitely the Ishmael from the Bible. And I will mention that there are a few Ishmaels in the Bible. Of course, the most famous one relates to the child, the son of Abraham, that he had with Hagar, the handmaid of Sarah. After about 10 years of having Hagar around, Sarah basically said to Abraham, "I'm past childbirthing years. It's time for you to have a son. Go in unto my handmaid." And they produced a child, and then Hagar was really treated horribly by Sarah, and she fled away into the wilderness, going back to Egypt. And at that point, God comes to her and says, "No, go back to your boss, Sarah. Submit to her. Call your son Ishmael." And then Abraham goes ahead and calls the son Ishmael. So that is the first use that we have of it in the biblical text. And then the next use we have is all the way during the period of Jeremiah's time. Now this is, I think, significant related to this papyrus because we have Ishmael being used on this papyrus, somebody telling him to send something. And so from the time period of Jeremiah, and this is the period when this Ishmael in the Bible is very active as well, during the period of Jeremiah. Now, I tried to bring up this point to Shmuel Ahituv, the professor, and he would have none of it, and you'll see that in the interview. I think it's quite funny. Nevertheless, we do have a correlation of the name staying around for a long time. This is interesting in itself, too, because if you think of a lot of the patriarchal names, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, those names don't really play into the biblical account later on, and yet here we have one name from the patriarchal period that is resurrected, if you like, during this time period of Judah, and this Ishmael actually is in cahoots, it seems, with a foreign king, which is interesting as well, at least the biblical one. But you see this name being used again, and then it is used one more time in the Bible during the period of Ezra and Nehemiah in the return. So you've got three individuals in the Bible that are called Ishmael, one of them from the patriarchal period, the other two later on, and one of them very specifically during the time period of Jeremiah. And so this was found and it worked its way to the United States, and then in the United States there was someone that alerted a biblical scholar about it, and they said, well, this isn't a Dead Sea Scroll from the time period of the Dead Sea, typical Dead Sea Scrolls from 300, 400, 500 years after this. This is very early. This is from the First Temple period. And so Etta Yardeni was then going to publish it, received a photograph of it, was going to publish it. And before that was done, they died. And so Shmuel Ahituv kind of took over this publishing process and then kind of set the ball rolling in many ways to get this papyrus back to Israel. And so this is going, the person that donated it is going to remain anonymous. That is their prerogative, and they desire to. But this here we have the third ancient First Temple period piece of writing on papyrus that is coming to light. So at this point, I think I'm going to play this interview about the papyrus that I took last Thursday, just outside of in the courtyard of the Bible Lands Museum with Professor Shmuel Ahituv. Professor Shmuel Ahituv, thank you very much for talking with us quickly. So you just gave a lecture in Hebrew about the new papyrus that you're showing to the public really for the first time, what you call the Ishmael papyrus. What can you tell us briefly about, since you're an epigraphist, briefly about the dating of this papyrus and its, the dating of this papyrus?
The date of the papyrus, I think it's the end of the 7th century or more the 6th century, beginning of the 6th century. It's written with a cursive letters, joining the letters even, and it was, I think, written with a broad stylus and too much ink on it. So it's some of the letters are curious, like the taff, which bends a little. So some people perhaps won't be happy with it.
Okay.
Yes, that is, but there's not much information. Says, don't send to Ishmael, don't send, and cry after him, and don't be of any use, or something else. That's all. It's the papyrus, and the last one is really the last line, but the first line perhaps is not the first one, and it's cut or even cut or torn, and the beginning and the end.
I've heard and I've read a lot about this over the past couple of days. Your good friend, as you talked about just then, Christopher Ralston, said that we should tap the brakes on whether this is a real papyrus from that or a fake. What can you tell us about that?
I can tell you that it was bought from Kandu. Kandu is the cobbler who became the seller of the middleman between the Bedouin and the team in Rockefeller.
Okay.
Yes, and he sold them in 1965 to an American lady who believed that she is buying a piece of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and she put it in
a framed case.
Yes, and with a picture of the two guys, the Mr. Kandu and Yusuf Saad, who was the curator of the Rockefeller Museum, and she kept it till she died in 2005, and it was in the legacy, and her son, after some 2018,
very recently.
Yes, recently, he asked his friend, he was a professor of Hebrew, and told him, look here, I have a piece of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And looked at him and said, no, it's not the Dead Sea Scrolls since we first temple. And so they photographed it and sent it to Ada Yardeni, and she included it in her book, was published posthumously, and it wasn't finished, and she didn't have the license to publish it.
Okay.
So they asked me to finish her book, and then it came to me. And when then we found who's the guy, who's the owner, and we negotiated with him, and really the American professor from Santa Barbara told him that it has to go home.
It has to go home.
And really he came and brought it.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
That's amazing.
So,
and he wanted to be anonymous.
Anonymous, wow, okay. So you're saying the chain of custody is pretty good. We know that...
Yes. Look, it glued on a piece of textile.
Yes.
And the papyrus was carbon for 14C.
Carbon dated, yep.
Yes, and it's okay.
It dates to that time period as well.
And the fabric was also checked by the people that are experts, the women experts in it. And they say, okay, it's from the 60s.
It's from the 60s as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so the story matches out.
Yes, it matches
extremely well.
We can't make more tests because how the papyrus, they can't take it out from the
fabric.
From the fabric.
Just one more question about the writing itself. I know you're an expert on biblical names and their use through periods. We obviously have Ishmael being used in the patriarchal time.
Yeah, it's common name.
But then in the biblical text, I believe the next use of it is during this period in which this papyrus was written. Is that correct?
You think about Ishmael ben Netanyahu, son of Netanyahu, who killed the...
Well, I'm saying that this name, do we have it elsewhere in the text?
No.
We don't have it elsewhere in the biblical text?
Don't speculate too much.
Right.
It was a common name, a nice Hebrew name.
Do people still use this name in Hebrew today?
No.
Not now. It belongs to different people.
Not now.
Well, thank you very much.
Our cousins.
No, cousins. That right. Cousins are.
Okay. Have a good time too.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
So we are very grateful to Professor Ahituv for that brief interview. And we're very grateful also that he speaks his mind, and he definitely does do that. And I wish his speech in Hebrew was available to everybody at this point. However, he definitely took issue to a lot of the comments of some other of his colleagues that would like to kind of wish away this, or at least present it like it's not an verifiable document from antiquity. That's what it is, and it definitely mentions Ishmael. And I think we have due course to definitely at least bring to light or bring this history of the ancient Ishmael from the Bible, from Jeremiah's time, since he was such an interesting figure, and a lot of the events surrounding his life, how this is right during the period of when most of Judah had gone into captivity. Jeremiah is remaining. The king's daughters are remaining also. And then there is the leadership of the state, or leadership of the vassal province now of the Babylonians is given over to this man Gedaliah, and he is executed by this Ishmael, and that's by the order of King Baalis, the Ammonite. And King Baalis, he's somebody that has been proven. He's only mentioned once in the Bible. We have a seal impression mentioning his name, a servant of King Baalis that was found, I think, about 20 years ago. We also have this Ishmael of royal seed, as it said in the book of Jeremiah, a seal impression of his name being discovered as well. And now we have this third mention of an Ishmael, or this other mention of an Ishmael from the same time period. So certainly Ishmael, I think it probably wasn't a name that is as popular, perhaps as common as many other Judean names. Perhaps as Professor Ahituv was letting on, it's not as common as some of the others, as Jeremiah, his name itself. However, it probably was a name that was in usage as well. So we don't know if we have the right guy, but possibly we do. This next discovery I want to talk about, again, is not a discovery that was made in an excavation, but rather a discovery that the Israeli Antiquities Authority have been on the hunt for themselves for the past almost 2 decades. This is referring to a coin that was minted during the Jewish Revolt, during the 4th year of the Jewish Revolt. So 69 CE is when this was minted. And it's funny because we were just talking, I think 3 weeks ago, with Dr. Yoav Fachi, one of the great coin experts in Israel, on our excavation on the Ophel, just from a couple of weeks ago when we concluded, and we were talking about how we haven't found in excavations a silver 4-year of the revolt coin. We found a bunch of these in our excavation just a couple of weeks ago, over a month ago, I suppose now, that we conducted with Professor Uzi Lievner, the head of the Institute of Archaeology at Hebrew University. We found numerous of these 4th year of revolt coins. So these are coins that are minted in Jerusalem by the rebels as the city is being besieged by the Romans. And so it captures this very last moment of Jewish freedom before they're going to go into exile for a couple of thousand years almost, really. And so they're very precious coins. They speak of the redemption of Zion. That's the inscription that's written on them, because they knew at that point, it used to be years 2, 3, or 1, 2, and 3, talk about, year 2 and 3, I should say, talk about the freedom of Zion. That's what they were fighting for, the freedom of Zion. And yet at this point, by the 4th year, and the just after the year, the 5th year ticked over, is when Jerusalem fell. But by the time the 4th year comes around, you do have a different inscription. It's to the redemption of Zion, because they knew the city was going to fall. It was going to happen. And they did do most of these in bronze. They're the ones that have been discovered, these bronze coins in our excavations. And we know they did some in silver. And they haven't found any in controlled excavations. Yet this one did appear and was looted. This is a silver coin, a silver 4th year of the revolt coin. And this article, this is from the Antiquities Authority, actually. This is their press release. They said this is earlier last week, last Monday. It says, the quarter shekel coins from the 4th year of the revolt have not previously been found in situ in archaeological excavations. One similar coin was acquired in the 1930s by the British Museum, and about 3 more unofficially circulate in the antiquities black market and among various collectors. In 2002, Palestinian antiquities looters unearthed a hoard of coins from the period of the Great Revolt in the Elah Valley area. Among the coins in the hoard were a quarter shekel made of silver from 69 CE. The Antiquities Authority spent the next 2 decades attempting to locate the coin, during which time it passed through illicit antiquities markets in Israel, Jordan, and the United Kingdom. In London, false provenance papers were prepared to export the quarter shekel from the UK to the US, where it was offered for sale at the Heritage Auctions World Coins and Ancient Coins Signature Auction, scheduled for August 3rd, 2017 in Denver, Colorado. Earlier this year, the case was passed to Colonel Matthew Bogdanos, chief of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office Antiquities Trafficking Unit. Working closely together, the Antiquities Authority, that's the Israeli Antiquities Authority, and the ATPU developed sufficient evidence to execute a seizure warrant for the coin and receive the court order repatriating the coin to Israel. So this is, again, you do have somewhat of a chain of custody there, which would show the coin, show the passage of the coin from excavation, though illegal, to the United States, and then being repatriated to Israel. So just really phenomenal to see. It's going to be to see one of these 4th year revolt coins in person. I will say, if you do want to read more about the 4th year of revolt coins in general, what the symbols that they have on them and why, we have written an article in the latest Let the Stone Speak about them. It's entitled More Rare Coins Discovered, and I'll leave a link for that in the show notes of today's program. Now, the final story I want to cover today is really exciting. It's one that is going to stay around in the news for a while, I think, as this cave and all of its all of its vessels and other artifacts, the tools, the bones themselves of the people get analyzed. This was a shocking discovery that was made by accident, really, in the last couple of days. And there is a video circulating, and I'm going to show you that in a second. This is a story that just came out from Ynet. I've translated it from Hebrew into English, so it might be a little bit dodgy or incomplete. However, you'll get the picture from it, and then I'll show the video. It's entitled "A Burial Cave from the Times of Ramesses the Great, containing intact objects, was discovered in Palmachim." So this is just to the southwest, I should say, of Rishon LeZion, south of Bat Yam, to the north of Ashkelon. So territory of the Philistines, when people would say the Philistines aren't there yet generally. However, this is the period, times of Ramses the Great, early 13th century BCE. Time stood still, a burial cave from the time of Pharaoh Ramses the Great, Ramses II, who ruled according to researchers at the time of the Exodus. We'll just throw that out right now. No, he didn't. Not if you believe the literal account in the Bible regarding the dating of the Exodus. Nevertheless, we'll continue. And in it many dozens of intact pottery and bronze vessels, just as they were placed in their place during the burial ceremony about 3,300 years ago, were discovered in the Palmachim National Park. The Antiquities authorities said that the vessels were burial offerings and that they were buried with the dead in the belief that they would be used by them in the next world. The cave was discovered by chance during works by the Nature and Parks Authority for the development of the national park. A tractor hit a rock, unexpectedly revealing the ceiling of an ancient burial cave. Dror Citron, inspector of the Antiquities Authority, identified the space in the cave. Archaeologists from the Antiquities Authority were called to the place, who descended a ladder into an incredible space that seemed frozen in time. The cave was carved in the shape of a square, and in the center of the ceiling was a pillar. So what I'm going to do now is cut to this video. It's in Hebrew. It goes for about 2 minutes, just of one of the Antiquities Authority people just walking around, just shocked, visibly shocked. And if you understand Hebrew, I'll put just a link to the video itself underneath in the show notes so you can just capture the wonder of these archaeologists coming across this. I mean, I saw it on social media a couple of days ago, and I was like, wait, what? What in the world is this? And you can see all the comments from the other archaeologists underneath there, just absolutely shocked by this discovery. So we'll cut across to that and show the video now. And as we do that, I'll just continue reading from this. This is Dr. Eli Yanai, an expert on the Bronze Age from the Antiquities Authority. He said this: "This is a once-in-a-lifetime find. It's not every day that you see an Indiana Jones set, a cave with dishes on the floor that haven't been touched in 3,300 years. We're talking about the late Bronze Age. These are precisely the days of the famous King Ramses II. The fact the cave was sealed and not robbed in later periods allows us, with the scientific means available today, to extract a great deal of information from the objects and from the materials that survived on them, and which are not visible to the eye, including organic materials. The cave can provide us with a complete picture of burial customs in the late Bronze Age. In the cave, mainly dozens of pottery vessels of various sizes and shapes were left. Among them, there are deep and shallow bowls, some of them which are painted red, set bowls with a high foot, cooking pots, jug, and clay candles, or oil lamps, I should say. According to Dr. Yanai, some of the jars were produced on the coast of Lebanon and Syria. Next to the jars, small storage vessels were found, mainly little goblets and pitchers, which were intended to store and trade precious materials in small quantities. These vessels were imported from the area of Tyre, Sidon, and other port cities on the coast of Lebanon. Also, many pottery vessels imported from Cyprus were found. And then, according to Dr. Yanai, tools of this type were brought to Israel in large quantities and were common byproducts for burials. Along the pottery, bronze arrowheads or spears were found in the cave. According to their position, they were placed in garbage made of organic material that did not survive, or bags that did not survive. Then one final quote. The finds in the cave from Dr. Yanai. The finds in the cave date back to the 13th century, during the 19th Egyptian dynasty, the days of Ramses. During this time, there was an Egyptian administration in the land, and then it talks about a few other things as well from it. So amazing. You can see the bones as well of several individuals that were found in there. Now, unfortunately, in just the short time period since when this video was taken, so just over the last couple of days, and before the cave was sealed, which it is sealed now, and despite, as this article says, security measures, one or more people entered the cave and reached several points. The vast majority of the objects remain in place, but a number of items appeared to have been stolen. And so this just got uncovered, and before you know it, you've got looters already getting in there, which really does speak to, the first two stories that we covered on today's program about how you do have all these artifacts that are coming out of the ground and have done for the past centuries, and yet a lot of them are being stolen, and it takes a long time for them to be regathered. Thankfully, a lot of them are starting to be regathered. That's all we're going to cover on today's program. Thank you very much for joining us today for Let the Stone Speak. If you'd like to see more of our programming, please do go to our website, armstronginstitute.org. And there's a tab there that'll take you to all the previous videos and podcasts where you can watch. If you haven't subscribed to our magazine, again, please do so by writing an email to letters@armstronginstitute.org. And there you can get the Let the Stone Speak magazine, again, sent to you wherever you are in the world for absolutely free. Get your free 1-year subscription there. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.